Welcome everyone. My name is Eric McLaughlin. I'm the astronomer for the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory, and one of our favorite things to do here at the observatory is, of course, stargazing. And we want to make sure you're able to stargaze well from wherever you happen to be. And so this series of videos will give you a lot of information on what's going on up in the sky right now. For July and August, we've got a lot to see, from a comet passing through this section of the solar system to the biggest planets in the solar system being nice and bright and high in the sky in the evening. We've got a lot to see, a lot to discuss, so let's jump right in. And here we are on our virtual view of the observatory deck. Now, as this is a virtual view, there will be some differences from what you will see in the evening skies. Most notably among them is the fact that this virtual view can eliminate light pollution. You will likely be dealing with some light pollution depending on where you are. You can get to some places that have darker skies, and for some things you'll definitely want that. For many things, what I would recommend especially is finding ways to mitigate the light pollution from your own home. If you have any floodlights or other things that are just producing a lot of glare, finding ways to shield that lighting or even shift its color away from the blue side to more of a reddish color or amber color, that alone will do a lot to help mitigate light pollution. And in the long run, if you make that move now, it will be something that will benefit not only you, but those around you trying to stargaze. Now, as we are getting ready to stargaze, of course, we need to actually be looking, well, at night. And of course, when we want to understand what we see at night, it is worth understanding how our sky moves, or rather, how the Earth does. We like to think that the sun just moves across our sky, and in fact, it really doesn't move across our sky as much as we rotate around underneath it. Now, as we go ahead and accelerate the flow of time, you can see it moving here, but again, we're on a rotating, roughly spherical object, so it's our view of the sun that is changing here, and we can actually view that another way by actually pulling out a nice grid known as the right ascension and declination grid, or the equatorial coordinate system. Now, as you can see here, the sun seems fixed on this sphere. It's not actually fixed. Over the course of a year, it will make a loop all the way around it, and this particular view gives us some really useful things, and I'm actually going to pause this right now. Right along the bottom of your screen, you will see a number of hours there. You'll see each of these lines is listed as, say, this is the 9-hour line, this is the 10, and this is the 11. What does that mean? Well, it'll be important in a moment. It's important to know that each division here is 1 hour of 24 on the right ascension declination grid. So, okay, moving on to actually getting nightfall, we need to wait for the sun to get all the way over, and as we are still quite close to the summer solstice, nightfall falls quite late. You'll want, for a good twilight, to wait for twilight to really start to begin to end around 9 p.m. So, yeah, stargazing right now is a late night activity. All right, there we are at 8:16. You can still see that it might be a few stars starting to show up, but it is very much so the depths of twilight right now. And as we accelerate time, once again, you can see the sky rotating around this point up here, and as we are now after 9 o'clock, we can start to see some things. In fact, that star right there, if you can't guess, well, it is the North Star. It is, in fact, Polaris. Polaris is nice and visible if you know where to look for it, and we have a nice setup to help us spot it right now, and that setup is being able to see Ursa Major right now, and Ursa Major is right on our northwestern skies. It'll be very worthwhile to be able to spot Ursa Major, and we can actually highlight Ursa Major like so. But Ursa Major is actually more well known for its asterism name here in North America. We can actually spot it as the Big Dipper. We can actually trace that out pretty readily by actually looking right over at this set of 7 stars going from here on down through all of these. These stars are really worthwhile to spot. That is our Big Dipper right there, and when we can actually spot those, we can actually find something really useful. Again, it's the North Star by actually going between these two stars. If we extend a line even further out from them, it points basically straight over to the North Star right there. So that is a really worthwhile thing to be able to spot in our night sky. Nevertheless, there is plenty of other things to spot, and it's also worth noting how the sky will shift over the course of the next month. How does the sky shift over the course of the next month? Well, I mentioned these hour numbers on the right ascension part of the grid, the lines that connect the north celestial pole to the south celestial pole. And how does the sky shift? Well, it shifts on average by 2 of those every month. And that is because the sun is moving around on what is known as the ecliptic. The ecliptic is this line right here. And over the course of 1 full year, it goes all the way around that from one side, all the way back around to where it started. And so, on average, the sun will cover about 2 of these grid points. It's a little bit closer to 2 around the solstices, a little bit further from 2 around the equinoxes. But that is all well and good. So where can we expect our sky in 1 month from now? Well, we can actually simulate that here by actually adjusting the time. 1 month from right now, it will shift that far over, again, by roughly 2 of these divisions here. And that is really handy for keeping track of how things will shift. If you want to see it from a day-to-day basis, it will move a bit like this. And you'll see the moon zip by there, and that is important to note because when the moon is up is also related to its phases, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Now, as we get on to next month, it is worth noting that we are moving again away from the summer solstice, and as such, the time at which the sun sets will be earlier and earlier, and so we can actually rewind time here, and you'll see that well before 9 o'clock we can start stargazing by mid to late August. However, by about, or you won't want to really start before around 8:15 or so for really good viewing. But nevertheless, it's always nice to note that you'll be able to stargaze a little bit earlier towards the end of this 1 month time frame we're looking at here. All right, that's all well and good. Let's get back to some darkness here. Now, again, looking at that moon right there, there's a lot of important things to note about it, and the fact that we also have some important events around these 2 guys right here, Saturn and Jupiter. Also, what we want to note about the moon is a few specific dates. Let's go ahead and take a look at NASA's Sky Events calendar. This view here gives us a lot of good information, and I'll leave a link in the description below for you to be able to actually find the site and look for a number of things for yourself. But this particular view shows us a lot of useful things, including the fact that we have Jupiter opposition we passed on the 14th of this month, and just yesterday we passed Saturn's opposition. Now what opposition is it is the point at which the object in question, in this case Jupiter and Saturn respectively, are on the opposite sides of the sky from the Sun. What does that mean? Well, it means that we're roughly in line with respect to our orbits, meaning that these objects will be very high in the sky late at night, and it's also these dates fall very near, or if not on, the date of closest approach to these objects, which means if you have a small telescope, I highly recommend taking a look at Jupiter and Saturn at this point. We are at prime early evening viewing of these objects, so you'll want to take a look if you can. Now, the other thing that we were looking at again was the moon, and the moon is something that really has a huge impact on your stargazing. Right now is actually a very ideal time to be stargazing because we actually just passed the new moon. That means the moon is very close to the sun. It sets at almost the exact same time as the sun does right now. It's actually a little bit later now that we're on the 21st. And as the week progresses, we'll see a waxing crescent phase. That is, the moon will get more and more well lit for us, or rather, we'll see more and more of the moon's daytime side. And as we get to first quarter next week, it will be something you see throughout the early evening. It'll be high in the sky at sunset, and it will set around midnight. or 1 in between those time frames, typically, for first quarter. Now, what we're doing for Swoon at the Moon this month is we're looking for a waxing gibbous phase, which is why we are having our Swoon at the Moon on the 30th of the month. And then once it actually goes on towards full moon, it is going to be very bright all night. So really your best time for stargazing this month is actually the 20th through the 26th. However, it doesn't mean you can't stargaze in those other times. You'll just want to wait a bit later. And then once you hit full moon, it's going to be just a bit too bright all night long for really good stargazing. However, by the time we hit third quarter towards the 11th of August, it will be high in the sky at sunrise and will rise closer to around roughly 3 a.m. So that is really when you can expect that to show up, which is unfortunately right around the same time as you can expect the best viewing for things like meteor showers. And the Perseids actually peak on the 12th of August. You'll want a very dark sky. Again, a very dark sky for viewing meteor showers. You can see a few meteors from somewhat light polluted skies, but you will miss most unless you go to very dark skies. So you will want to get out of the city if you want to see the Perseids, and unfortunately it will also be interrupted by that just past third quarter moon. After that point, though, again, third quarter moon is a great time to be stargazing in the early evening anyway. So yeah, all through the 11th, 12th, on into the next week are all great for stargazing. So next time we have our next stargazing primer, we'll be on into the next best time for stargazing. So I'll leave that for future me to discuss with you. Alright, so back to our virtual view of the night sky. There's a lot to talk about again, and one of the things we do want to focus on are those nice big bright planets over there, Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn and Jupiter are hanging out by Sagittarius and Capricornus. Again, if you want to see Capricorn, it's sort of below our horizon right now. But that ecliptic is the plane of the solar system, so you will expect to see Jupiter and Saturn near it. They will be looking nice at this time. This particular night, you'll be able to actually zoom in. If you've got a good telescope, you might be able to spot Titan down below it here. The rest of the moons are a bit of a challenge to spot. But again, you'll need a decent power telescope to be able to spot some things, though you actually need a less powerful telescope than you might think to be able to spot the rings. It's worth seeing the rings if you have not. They are stunning. Likewise, if you want to see Jupiter, Jupiter will be hanging out in Sagittarius, and the moons of Jupiter are always good to spot. And from night to night, you'll actually see the moons of Jupiter, the 4 biggest ones, that is Io, Europa, Ganymede, and Callisto. They will be shifting around Jupiter. Every night you'll see them in a different spot because they have a variety of different orbit times, orbit periods, ranging from a couple of days out to 16. So you always find them in different spots. So always worth taking a close look at Jupiter. Even if you can't get close enough to see that great red spot there, it's still worth getting a view of that planet. Now, it's also worth noting where they are, as they are just gotten out of Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a very worthwhile constellation to find because it is one that has some nice things to spot. And as we have it here, it should be pretty plain to see a nice little asterism for finding it, and that is the teapot. And as we're looking at the teapot, you can see it pretty clearly. If we actually trace it out all through here, we actually have a nice teapot shape with the handle where I'm currently drawing right now, and there we go. There's our teapot shape, and if you actually connect the lines in between it, you end up with a nice little handle, a nice little spout, and it's not in the song, but there's a nice little lid to it as well. So we do have a nice little teapot, but that teapot is one thing to spot. It also helps you find another thing. In this light pollution reduced view, you can actually see this bit of haze here. That is not cloud cover, that is the Milky Way, and the center of the Milky Way is right off the spout, right in this area roughly. And there's a lot of really great things to see towards the center of the Milky Way. The center of the Milky Way is about 26,000 light years in that direction, where we have a supermassive black hole around 4 million times the mass of our own sun. Now, that Milky Way band, if you're able to look for it, it stretches up off into this direction, where we actually have the Summer Triangle, a set of stars that are really worth spotting. They're very easy to spot, even in decently light polluted skies. You should be able to spot them right here. They, of course, are Vega, Deneb, and Altair that make out the Summer Triangle. So, again, Vega, Deneb, and Altair trace out the Summer Triangle there. It is very easy to spot this. Highly recommend looking for it, because once you find it, you'll be able to find quite a few other things. Again, the Milky Way actually passes right through the center of that particular asterism. And Vega, in particular, is a worthwhile star to get a closer look at, because it is located in the constellation of Lyra, and if you have a good telescope, you might be able to spot something in Lyra, and that is M57. M57 hangs out right in between these two stars here, so if you find Vega, look for a dim parallelogram of stars right near it to its southeast in the early evening. But if you're able to get a good power telescope, you might be able to spot this little donut here. This is the Ring Nebula. It's M57, and M57 is a planetary nebula that is moving off our screen because we're so zoomed in we can see the rotation of the Earth. There we go. And that object is quite a long ways off. It is on the order of around 2,800 light years away on this particular estimate. Estimates do vary, mind you. But this object is the last breath of a dying star. It is worth seeing, but don't expect to see color in your telescope, because your eyes will notice light before they detect color. And so if you're looking at this object with a decent telescope, you are likely to see something that looks like a bit of a hazy donut, or maybe like a blood vessel viewed through a microscope. But it's not the only deep space object we can look for right now, because once you find the Summer Triangle here, right above it, as we're viewing right now, heading towards the meridian in our early evening skies, is the constellation of Hercules. And in Hercules, we actually have another object, and as we are very, very close to zenith here, if we actually highlight the meridian, this is the line connecting north to south across our sky, and right up near the meridian is a nice little object known as M13. Called the last one M57. M13 is also in the same catalog. They're called M13 and M57 because Charles Messier found them and felt like they looked like little fuzzy blobs. But those fuzzy blobs, he realized, were not comets, and so he wanted to actually identify them very clearly as not being comets for people in the future to be able to not make the mistake of viewing them. This is instead a globular cluster, and there are a number of these orbiting around the center of the Milky Way galaxy. They have on the order of hundreds of thousands to a few million stars, and they are jam-packed together. If you get a good telescope, you might be able to resolve some of those dimmer stars and actually see them as more than a fuzzy blob, but it is nonetheless worth looking at. And as long as we're talking about the Not a Comet catalog, it is worth noting one really big thing going on right now, and that is that there is an actual comet worth viewing right now, zooming through the solar system. And as it zooms through the solar system, it ends up giving us a nice view right now. It has already passed its closest approach to the sun, and as such is already dimming. But if you want to spot it, you need to know where to look. And where you want to look is actually not in this direction. You don't look towards the east, it's going to be over towards the northwest. Right now it is located directly below Ursa Major, and you might be saying, well, where is it here? All I see is nothing over here. Well, you will want binoculars to be able to spot this, and you will want to look very shortly after sunset. In twilight time frame is when you want to start looking for it. Don't give up, because it will get easier to see as it gets darker until it gets too close to the horizon. And in fact, as it is right now, if you were to be in the observatory looking for it, on the deck, you would not spot it because the observatory is in the way. You got to actually get that out of the way. And if we want to really give ourselves an artificial horizon, let me switch our coordinate system over to an altitude azimuth one which shows us compass headings along the bottom, and on the right we can see altitude above the horizon. Now, our horizon is, our true horizon as it's stated, is where we see our compass headings here, so anything below that is below the ground. So, if we're looking off in this direction here, where is this comet? Well, this comet is known as C2020 F3, or better known as NEOWISE. And as we look at this search here, we can see there are actually a couple in this catalog. There's, I believe, more than that. But 2020 F3 NEOWISE is named that because, well, it was discovered this year, and F is the marker for late March, as it is 6 every, F is the 6th letter. Every month is divided up into 2 letters. And so this is the third comet third comet discovered, not just by NEOWISE, but in general, discovered in the second half of March. So where is it? Oh, it's right there below Ursa Major, like I said. And right now it is, right now being 9:30, it is about 20 degrees above our horizon. It is getting dimmer. You will want at least binoculars to view this. You actually won't see as much with a good high-powered telescope because this is a very extended object. If you want to see the tail of it, you don't want very high magnification. You just want to collect a lot of light, so you want big apertures, and even basic binoculars will help you get that. So where is it going to be? Well, it's moving out of the solar system as shown in this diagram here, and it is on a very, very long orbit. It is an over 6,000 year orbit that takes it hundreds of times further away from the sun than the Earth is. And so we won't get to see this again, at least personally. Humanity might 6,000 years from now. And hopefully in that time frame, well, maybe we could go visit it. But in any case, it is on its way out of the solar system. And so if we are looking at this object, we can zip back to our view of the sky here, where we can actually say, okay, where is it going to be over the course of the next few days? Well, let's go ahead and pull up our time travel option here, and as we step forward in time, you'll see it actually ends up higher in the sky for a given time of night. But again, as it does, it will get dimmer and dimmer very, very rapidly. So you will want to view this object as soon as possible. By the time it is up in Coma Berenices, you will probably have a huge challenge trying to spot it, and by then it won't have as much of a tail to be even worth spotting. So get looking at this object. It is definitely worth looking at. There are, of course, other things worth looking up at in the night sky, and over the course of the next month, we can see some things very close to home, and actually some man-made objects as well. Of course, the most notable man-made object worth spotting in general is the International Space Station, and this view here is a site called CalSky. I'll have a link to that in the description below. Definitely worth taking a look there. And this is really good at predicting when the International Space Station will be overhead. It gives good estimates of a number of things, including when it appears, when it reaches its highest point in the sky, called culmination, and when it disappears as well. So it's worth looking at, especially if you want to try and spot the station. However, at the moment, there's not much for the rest of the month that will be really great views. As you can see over on the right, you can actually see some predicted tracks of the space station over our sky, and when they're really close to the edge, it means it's really down on the horizon. You're also going to find it to be very dim and easily confused with aircraft if you see that scenario. So over the course of the next month, when should we be looking for this? Well, I'm going to zip through this very well, only stopping in a couple of spots to give you an idea on a couple of really good sightings. So if we move on down here, we can actually see a whole bunch of times when it's right near the horizon all the way through the end of the month. There aren't many until you start getting into the 31st. We have a decent one at around 9:30, but into August we're going to really start getting some good ones, like on the 2nd at, again, around 9:30. We've got a really good flyover where it's going to go really almost straight overhead before it disappears. That is, it falls into the Earth's shadow right in that time frame. So if you're wanting to spot the station, I highly recommend looking for Sunday, August 2nd at 9:30 p.m. roughly. That is really when you want to be looking. Again, it's going to get to minus 4.1 magnitude, which is very near the maximum brightness of Venus. It is going to be nice and bright that night. You'll have a few other good chances in this month as well. Some of these might end up early in the morning, but most of them right now are in our evening skies, which is really handy for us to be able to spot easily. And so those are all our flyovers coming up this month, as we've currently been able to predict. So definitely want to get out there and take a look up at the sky for that. And with that, we're out of time for today. Hope to see you guys again next month when we've got a lot more things to talk about for the months of August and September. A special thank you to the Rancho Mirage Library and Observatory Foundation. And thank you for joining us for our first Stargazing Primer video. I want to encourage you to remember that the sky waits for no one, so you want to make sure you keep on looking up. Have a good night, everyone.